Welcome to all of you. In today's video, we will know about the term deconstruction from the book A Glossary of Literary Terms written by M.H. Abrams. So, deconstruction, as applied in the criticism of literature, designates a theory and practice of reading which questions and claims to subvert and undermine the assumption that the system of a language provides grounds that are adequate to establish the boundaries, the coherence or unity, and the determinate meaning of a literary text. Typically, a deconstructive reading sets out to show the conflicting forces within the text itself serve to dissipate the seeming definiteness of its structure and meanings into an indefinite array of incompatible and undecidable possibilities. The originator and namer of deconstruction is the French thinker Jacques Derrida, among whose precursors were Friedrich Nietzsche, born in 1844, died in 1900, and Martin Heidegger, born in 1889 and died in 1976. They were German philosophers who put the radical question fundamental philosophical concepts such as knowledge, truth, and identity, as well as the Sigmund Freud, born in 1856 and died in 1939, whose psychoanalysis violated traditional concepts of a coherent individual consciousness and a unitary self. Derrida presented his basic views in three books, all published in 1967, entitled of Grammatology, second, Writing and Reference, third, Speech and Phenomena. Since then, he has since then he has reiterated, expanded, and applied those views in a rapid sequence of publications. Derrida's writings are complex and elusive, and the summary here can only indicate some of their main tendencies. His point of vantage is what he calls of grammatology is that the axis prepositions that there is no outside the text. Like all Derrida's key terms and statements, this has multiple significations, but a primary one is that a reader cannot get beyond verbal signs to any things in themselves which, because they are independent of system of language, might serve to anchor a determinable meanings. Derrida's reiterated claim is that not only all Western philosophies and theories of language, but all Western uses of language, hence all Western culture, are logocentric. That is, they are centered or grounded on the logos, which in Greek signified both word and rationality. Or in a phrase he adopts from Heidegger, they rely on metaphysics of presence. They are logocentric according to Derrida, in part, in part because they are phonocentric, that is, they grant implicitly or explicitly logical priority or privilege to speech over writing as the model for analyzing all discourse. By logos or presence, Derrida signifies the what he also calls an ultimate referent, a self certifying and self sufficient ground or foundation available to us totally outside the play of language itself, that is directly present to our awareness and serves to center, that is to anchor, organize, or and guarantee the structure of the linguistic system, and as a result suffixes to fix the bounds, coherence, and determinate meaning of any spoken or written utterance within that system. On Derrida's decentering of structuralism, you can refer post-structuralism. Historical instances of claimed foundations for language are God as the guarantor of its validity, or a Platonic form of true reference of a general term of a Hegelian telos or goal toward which all process strives, or an intention to signify something determinate that is directly present to the awareness of the person who intimates an utterance. Derrida undertakes to show that these and all other attempts by Western philosophy to establish an absolute ground in presence and all implicit reliance on such a ground in using language are bound to fail. Especially, he desires his skeptical exposition against the phonocentric assumption, which he regards as central in Western theories of language. That is, at the instant of speaking, the intention of a speaker to mean something, determined by an utterance, is immediately and fully present in the speaker's consciousness and is also communicable to the auditor. In Derrida's view, we must always say more and other than we intended to say. Derrida expresses his alternative conception that the play of linguistic meaning is undecidable in terms derived from Saussure's view that in science system both the signifiers means the material elements of a language, whether spoken or written, and both the signifier and the signified means their conceptual meanings. So both the signifier and signifieds owe their seeming identities not to their own positive or inherent features but to their differences from other speech sounds, written marks, or conceptual significations. From this view, Derrida evolves his radical claim that the features that in any particular utterance would serve to establish the signified meaning of a word are never present to us in their own positive identity, since both these features and their significations are nothing other than a network of differences. On the other hand, neither can these identifying features be said to be strictly absent. Instead, in any spoken or written utterance, the apparent meaning is the result only of a self effacing trace. Self effacing in that one is not aware of it, which consists of all the non present differences from other elements in the language system that invest the utterance with its effect of having a meaning in its own right. The consequence, in Derrida's view, is that we can never, in any instance of speech or writing, have a demonstrably fixed and decidable present meaning. He concedes that the differential play of language may produce the effects of decidable meaning in an utterance or text, but asserts that these are merely effects and lack a ground that would justify an assured interpretation. In a characteristic move, Derrida coins the portmanteau term difference, in which he says he uses the spelling ans instead of ins, ence, to indicate a fusion of two senses of French verb differ, to be means to be different, and to defer, defer. So this double sense points to the phenomenon that on the one hand, a text prefers the effect of having significance, that is the product of its difference, but that on the other hand, since this proffered significance can never come to the rest in an actual presence or in a language independent reality, Derrida calls a transcendental signified. Its determinate specification is deferred from one linguistic interpretation to another in a movement or play, as Derrida puts up in Embime, that is, in an endless regress. To Derrida's view, then it is difference that makes possible that meaning whose possibility as decidable meaning is necessary baffles. As Derrida says in another of his coinages, the meaning of any spoken or written utterance by the action of opposing internal linguistic forces is inevitably disseminated a term which includes among its deliberately contradictory significations that of having an effect of meaning, a semantic effect, or dispersing meanings among innumerable alternatives and negating any specific meaning. There is thus no ground in that incessant play of difference that constitutes any language for attributing a decidable meaning or even a finite set of determinately multiple meanings, which he calls polyseminism, to any utterance that we speak or write. What Derrida calls polysemism is what William Emerson called ambiguity. So, as Derrida puts in the Writing and Difference book, that the absence of transcendental signified extends the domain and the play of signification infinitely. Sorry. So several of Derrida's skeptical procedures have been specially influential in reconstructive literary criticism. A cardinal procedure is to subvert the innumerable binary oppositions such as speech, writing, nature, culture, truth, error, male, female, which are essential structural elements in logocentric language. Derrida shows that such oppositions constitute a tactic hierarchy in which the first term functions as privileged and superior, and the second term as derivative and inferior. Derrida's procedure is to invert the hierarchy by showing that the primary term can be made out to be derivative from or a special case destabilize four hierarchies, leaving them in condition of undecidability among deconstructive literary critics. One such demonstration is to take the standard hierarchical opposition of literature criticism to invert it so as to take criticism primary and literature secondary, and then to represent as an undecidable set of oppositions the assertions that criticism is the species of literature and that literature is a species of criticism. A second operation influential in literary criticism is Derrida's reconstruction of any attempt to establish a securely determinate bound or limit or margin to a textual work so as to differentiate what is inside from what is outside the work. A third operation in his analysis of the inherent non-logically or rhetoricity, that is the inescapable reliance on rhetorical figure and figurative language in all uses of language, including in what philosophers have traditionally claimed to be the strictly literal and logical argumentative philosophy. Derrida, for example, emphasizes the indispensable reliance in all modes of discourse on metaphors that are assumed to be merely convenient substitutes of literal or proper meanings. Then he undertakes to show, on the one hand, that the metaphors cannot be reduced to literal meanings, but on the other hand, that supposedly literal terms are themselves metaphors whose metaphoric nature has been forgotten. Derrida's characteristic way of proceeding is not to lay out his reconstructive concepts and operations in a systematic exposition, but to allow them to emerge in a sequence of exemplary close reading of passages from writing that ranges from Plato through Jean-Jacques Rousseau to present era writings that by standard classification are mainly philosophical although occasionally literary. He describes his procedure as a double reading. Initially, that is, he interprets a text as in the standard fashion, legible. Legible means readable or intelligible, since it engenders effects of having determinate meanings. But this reading, Derrida says, is only provisional as a stage toward a second or deconstructive critical reading, which disseminates the provisional meaning into indefinite range of signification that he claims always involve in a term taken from logic and aporia. And aporia, an inseparable deadlock or double bind of incompatible or contradictory meaning which are undecidable, in that we lack any sufficient ground for choosing among them. The result in Derrida's rendering is that each text deconstructs itself by undermining its own supposed grounds and dispersing itself into incoherent meanings. In a way, he claims that the deconstructive reader neither initiates nor produces. Deconstruction is something that simply happens in a critical reading. Derrida asserts, furthermore, that he has no option except to attempt to communicate his deconstructive readings in the prevailing logocentric language, hence, that his own interpretative texts deconstruct themselves in the very act of deconstructing the text to which they are applied. He insists insists that, however, that deconstruction has nothing to do with destruction, and that all the standard uses of language will inevitably go on. What he undertakes, he says, is merely of situate or reinscribe any text in a system of difference which shows the instability of the effects to which the text owes its seeming intelligibility. Derrida did not propose deconstruction as a mode of literary criticism, but as a way of reading all kinds of texts so as to reveal and subvert the tacit metaphysical presuppositions of Western thought. His views and procedures, however, have been taken up by literary critics, especially in America, who have adapted Derrida's critical reading to the kind of close reading of particular literary text, which had earlier been the familiar procedure of new criticism. They do so, however, Paul Deman has said, in a way which reveals that the new critical close reading were not nearly close enough. The end results of the two kinds of close readings are utterly diverse. New critical explications of text had undertaken to show that a great literary work, in the tight internal relations of its figurative and paradoxical meanings, constitutes a freestanding, bounded, and organic entity of multiplex yet determinate meanings. On the contrary, a radically deconstructive close reading undertakes to show that a literary text lacks a totalized boundary that makes in an entity, much less or organic unity. Also, that the text by a play of internal counter forces disseminates into an indefinite range of self-conflicting significations. Some deconstructive critics claim that a literary text is superior to non-literary text, but only because, by its self-reference, to show itself to be more aware of features that all texts inescapably share, its fictionality, its lack of genuine ground, and especially its patent rhetoricity or use of figurative procedures, features that make any right reading or correct reading for a text impossible. Paul Deman was the most innovative and influential of the critics who applied deconstruction to the reading of literary text. In Deman's later writings, he represented the basic conflicting forces within a text under the headings of grammar. Grammar means the code or rules of language, as opposed to rhetoric. Rhetoric means the untruly play of figures and troops, and aligned these with other opposed forces such as the constative and performative linguistic functions that had been distinguished by John Astin. In its grammatical aspect, language persistently aspires to determinate referential and logically ordered assertions, which are persistently dispersed by its rhetorical aspect into an open set of non-referential and illogical possibilities. A literary text, then, of inner necessity says one thing and performs another, or, as Deman's alternatively puts the matter, a text simultaneously asserts and denies the authority of its own rhetorical mode. The inevitable result for a critical reading is an aporia of vertiginous possibilities. Barbara Johnson, once a student of Paul Deman, has applied deconstructive reading not only to literary texts but to writings of other critics, including Derrida himself. Her succinct statement of aim and methods of deconstructive reading is often cited, and the lines are: deconstruction is not synonymous with destruction. The deconstruction of a text doesn't proceed by random doubt or arbitrary subversion, but by the careful teasing out of varying forces of signification within the text itself. If anything is destroyed in a deconstructive reading, it is not the text, but the claim to unequivocal unequivocal domination of one mode of signifying over another. From the book The Critical Difference, published in 1950, page number 5. Then J. Hills Miller, once the leading American representative of Geneva School of Consciousness Criticism, later became one of the most prominent of deconstructors, known especially for his application of this type of critical readings to prose fiction. Miller's statement of his critical practice indicates how drastic the result may be by applying to works of literature the concepts and procedures that Derrida had developed for deconstructing the foundations of Western metaphysics. In his words, he says that deconstruction as a mode of interpretation works by a careful and circumspect entering of each textual labyrinth. The deconstructive critic seeks to find by this process of retracting the element in the system studied which is illogical. The thread in the text is in question, which will unravel it all, or to lose a stone which will pull down the whole building. The deconstruction rather annihilates the ground on which the building stands by showing that the text has already annihilated the ground, knowingly or unknowingly. Deconstruction is not a dismantling of the structure of the text, but a demonstration that it has already dismantled itself. So Miller's conclusion is that any literary text, as the ceaseless play of irreconcilable and contradictory meaning, is indeterminable and undecidable. Hence, that all reading is necessarily misreadings. So that is all about the deconstruction. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope this video will be liked by you, and if it is liked, then please share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot for watching this video. God bless us all.